feeling like I'm Akademiks.
If you guys don't know, it appears that all the lawyers are hinting towards is one thing, that Gucci Mane does not want to take the stand in a federal trial. Gucci does not want to talk to the feds. It's been all but confirmed at this point that Gucci Mane did talk to the local authorities, which is Dallas PD. Now, I'm pretty sure some people are going to have different conversations about that to say, well, he didn't really talk to them. He just talked to his security guard, and his security guard happens to be police, and it got related to they're going to try whatever way they can to whatever. Now, all of these things actually bode really well for Shiesty. If I'm Pooh Shiesty, I'm going to go balls to the wall and make it where the only way I even have a chance to go to jail is you have to have Gucci up there singing like a canary bird. I think the culture mixed with a lot of different things is going to probably have Gucci doing cold feet, and also about the idea that Gucci might get up there and plead the fifth. When I was thinking about pleading the fifth, I'm like, how could that affect anything? Apparently, he could plead the fifth with the idea in mind, you plead the fifth if, maybe your testimony could incriminate yourself. I was like, well, he's a victim. How could he plead the fifth if there's nothing to incriminate him? They're saying, well, if he is saying his statement to the police were lies and he just exaggerated, he could plead the fifth because he would be admitting to giving statements or falsely given statements to a law enforcement officer, which in certain jurisdiction, definitely federally, is considered a crime. So if you falsely give statements to a police officer, especially in filing a report, and that's usually a local law, you could go to jail. So if that's the case and Gucci, doesn't want to stand by what he's saying and he's now going with like, oh, that's a lie, he could plead the fifth. So that's kind of one of the ways. But if you guys don't know, his attorney, Bradford Cohen, he actually went on Law and Crimes, and I got to shout out to my man Bradford Cohen, good friend of mine, on camera and off camera. By the way, me and his issues, we had issues at first. He called me out back in the day over some Kodak shit. He really loves Kodak. One thing I like about him, I don't think he deals with clients. He deals with people. He loves, his clients, he goes hard. Because I remember back in the day, me and him got into it. And I was like, dude, you're a lawyer. Why are you playing PR? Let the PR do this. But it just showed how much he cared about Kodak. He didn't want nothing bad about Kodak being said. Anyway, the point is, really good attorney. And I'm not just over here glazing. I'm saying that for a reason. If you go back and look at, there's a Vlad interview with Big 30's lawyer. And I don't want to kick this gentleman's back in because I hear he's a fine attorney too. But I believe that Big 30's attorney volunteered way too much info, right? He volunteered so much info that potentially you could hurt your client. And again, granted, your client's on the hook for this, not you. But if you go in court and you're now selling up a grand story, or you're kind of breaking everything down, the feds could just use what you're saying to kind of counter what their angle is going to be. And I think he gave up a lot here, even though Big 30 is not the source, or he's not who everybody wants in this indictment. They want Pooh Shiesty. He said way too much. He was going down the indictment line by line. He's confirming certain stuff. He's like, oh yeah, they were beefing over a contract. Like, oh no, you shouldn't even want to say that. Remember, you're the defendant. You're the defendant's attorney. You don't want to kind of come up with any story. Just have no story, right? Let them have to prove everything, right? When you now have a story, part of them trying to prove their story is to prove that your story is bullshit. Right? Remember, you don't have to put up a defense, or you don't have to come with your story. You just have to prove that their story is bullshit. By the way, there is some updates which I think went over everybody's head. I don't know if anyone seen this. They said, going back in a Wayback Machine, there was actually proof that Pooh Shiesty was actually complaining about his label. So they said when Pooh Shiesty just got out, in December. They said Pooh Shiesty posted this. Mom Ties Global and my cameraman, Solo Surdy, the only two in the world that gave me some on my release. Nigga, no label, no family, no rap niggas or rap bitches, no friends, no homie, not even a bitch nigga on trade day, and I ain't never told, went like a hoe, not keep it real, not stand on business, ain't let shit slide, nigga, and everybody still forgot about and said fuck me. So this was Pooh Shiesty saying that when he got out, I guess he was expecting the handouts, right? Like, this is like kind of normal. Nigga get out of jail, you think it's his birthday. I mean, Demon home, but Demon home to a bunch of gifts. Oh, here's this, here's that. And I guess he felt he was owed something. Now, before we get all the way into did Gucci Mane owe him something, I do want to tell you how the music business works because, people keep hearing these crazy numbers. Yo, Gucci made $24 million off of him. How? Like, I know this music business really well. Like, if you tell me that Pooh Shiesty gets locked up and he makes $24 million or Gucci makes $24 million, I don't see it. But it could happen. It could happen. However, this is how usually contracts work. The contract is going to tell how much Gucci gets and how much Pooh Shiesty gets. So if, let's say, $24 million was made, that means money should have automatically been given or been allocated or, been paid out to Pooh Shiesty, right? Regardless if he's free or not. So if he's not talking about that money, now if that money wasn't paid, that means your label, they're robbing you. But I don't think that's the money he's talking about. I think, whether that money went towards legal bills, keeping the family good or whatever, I think he expected Gucci to give him like $1 million or something when he came out. But this is where Pooh Shiesty actually has a big miscalculation. There is no label that gives you free money. You go back to look at these guys. I don't care if it's Gotti. I just seen Gotti do something. Was it Gotti or somebody else? It was like, oh, the CEO just bought someone a car. That's usual tactics. We're buying it from your money. You're getting billed from it. Like, it's your money. We're not using our money to buy you a car. You got out of jail. Oh, shit. We gave you $500,000 cash and we bought you a new Ferrari and a new this and got you a new condo. Bro, we're adding it to the bottom line. So this idea of being given something, I'm kind of wondering if Pooh Shiesty thought that he was going to get this scot-free, if he thought he was just going to be gifted this because he's a real nigga, because he kind of mentioned, he's like, I never told, I never did this, I stood solid. Damn, how nobody ain't got me? So if that's the case, he has a real big misunderstanding of the music business, right? Actually, here's the thing. Your label would most likely only want to give you that when they know you've signed a new deal. If you signed a new deal while in lockup, which you could, or you sign it when you get out, yeah, of course they're going to come with a big car. They're going to come with this because they're going to just backload it on your budget. So apparently he puts this out. He basically says, I never got no money from no label, even family. Then the next post was, what is this? Oh, then shortly after, Yo Gotti starts posting him. Okay? So apparently right at this time, he starts shouting out Yo Gotti. All right? Yo Gotti posts him. And then he even says in a song, type of influence I got where I'm from, got Yo Gotti toting a Drake. Now, I also say this to say, I'm wondering if Gucci was green or Gucci thought these guys weren't serious. Because I think most of us keep saying, how the hell did Gucci go? You go in a situation, there's 9 niggas with ski masks and all type of stuff in a room with you. You think you're going to go record music. Your security's outside guarding the front door of the lobby, not the door of the studio. You must have thought nothing was going to happen. And where I'm confused is, why would you think nothing is going to happen if this guy has been pretty much behind the scenes showing that he's unhappy? He's shouting everybody else out. He's saying nobody ain't give him shit. I could imagine, he doesn't seem like the guy to be just smiling in your face and then get mad. It seemed like he probably would have voiced it to you like, yo, I'm not happy with this. Why would you think this was going to be cool? Also, I just noticed this. This is like the cover of FDO, I believe. I didn't notice the snakes right here. Look at the snakes. Like, come on, bruv. This is the type of guy you think you could trust? Anyway, listen to Bradford Cohen. He's kind of breaking down the case a bit. Check this out.
The specific defense is in evidence is going to produce, you know, and then
there we go.
Business. I wasn't his musical lawyer or entertainment lawyer.
They do ask about, yo, why? They claim that Pooh Shiesty went to Staples. What the fuck he got to go to Staples for? He printed out that contract that he wanted to get released out of, right?
I know that they did have a contract together because during his first case, Gucci was very involved in terms of what's going on. He was concerned for how things were going in the case and how the result was going to be at the end of the day and what the result was going to be. So I knew they had a contractual relationship. And I also do a lot of work for artists that are signed to Atlantic Records. And I know that both Pooh and Gucci are signed to Atlantic Records ultimately. So how it works is usually an artist is signed to a label, and then they create their own.
Let's get down a little bit.
If he testifies the way the song plays out.
So they asked if that song could be used.
Go through the main allegations from this incident, and then we'll get a little bit more into this. So there is allegedly, according to the government, an argument, and they claim it ends up with Williams Jr., again, Pooh Shiesty, being accused of taking out a black AK-style pistol, pointing it at RD, presumably Gucci Mane, demanding he sign the contract release paperwork. RD
Somebody said, Ak is super slow. The robbery already happened. No, you're super slow. This thing that I actually showed y'all, this is in December. The robbery happens in January. So the robbery did not happen when he posted this, okay? When he posted this, look at the caption. This is a December post from Shiesty. He's vented and saying his label didn't give him nothing when he came home, okay? And he was going through a dark period. He also started giving shout-outs to Gotti in interviews. He made FDO. And he also linked with CMG, allegedly was trying to get a deal going. So the person who said, no, you need to understand what the fuck I'm saying. Shiesty was giving up very clear warnings he was unhappy before the January 10th robbery. Okay? All this is before.
I've said this before, that...
No, not this. My bad.
Allegedly complied, signed it. And then there is the claim that RD was not allowed to leave as he was held at gunpoint. So there's allegations that Wright also allegedly recorded RD signing the paperwork and being forced to say that he released Williams Jr. from the contract. And then afterwards, it's alleged that Williams Jr. took RD's wedding ring and watch and earrings and cash. It was alleged that other defendants took out guns too and demanded property from other alleged victims. There was an allegation that McDaniel threatened to shoot BP, that MM was choked to the point that he nearly passed out. And embedded in the complaint are what appear to be photos allegedly showing cuts or abrasions on MM's neck and wrist. And there's also a claim that his wallet and watches, a Louis Vuitton bag, headphones, they were stolen. And then I'm just going to read this part verbatim and then we'll get into it. Quote, RD was pushed onto the couch in the control room, causing the victims to believe they were going to be executed. Williams Jr. placed the barrel of a firearm to the back of BP's head and ordered him and RD to leave the control room and the studio through the west entrance of the office building. RD then instructed CW and TD to escort them to their vehicle. As the victims left, MM turned to Williams Jr. and asked him if they were really taking his watches. Based on later recovered surveillance video footage, the target suspects left the studio and the office building through the east entrance at approximately 4:48 p.m. So a bunch of questions here. Bradford, I'll first start with this. If this alleged recording of RD signing the contract against his will, what should we be thinking about that?
So far I haven't seen the recording, nor does anyone have a copy of the recording as of now. I don't know if there ever will be a copy of that recording. There has been no copy of the alleged contract that has been signed, nor has one been provided during the bond hearing. And they have actually said they don't know if one even exists. They suppose one exists. That's that part of it. Then the interesting part about, hey, am I really having my watches stolen? That's kind of a weird statement to be made between these individuals. And then what I think also is really important is the sloppiness of the complaint. At the beginning of the complaint, if you read, it says this robbery occurred at approximately 4:50 p.m. at this address. Then later on in the complaint, it says they all left at 4:48 p.m. at this address. So even the sloppiness of the complaint is quite shocking when it comes to someone who's getting charged with a life felony.
My boy Bradford Cohen already scoring some points. Hey, y'all claim the crime happened at 4:50, but you said niggas left at 4:48. Which is it?
That's just one mistake that was made in that complaint. There's others that were made and contradictions that happened during that complaint that were very unusual. But there's also another part where they say that Lontrell, Pooh, held this gun to somebody's head and said all these different things. And then there's another part of the complaint that says, actually, he told one guy, hey, put your gun down, don't shoot this guy or something like that. So there's a lot of contradicting statements that were made within the complaint, not to mention how sloppy the complaint was put together. And during the bond hearing, I think very smartly, they had the FBI agent that actually wrote that complaint. She's only been an FBI agent for 3 years. They had her in the courtroom, but they didn't want to put her on the stand to be cross-examined. They put another FBI agent who was like a 16-year FBI agent. They put her on the stand to testify as to what the other FBI agent wrote in her complaint. The whole thing was quite unusual. And like I said, it's weird that they would do this without an indictment and just a complaint, but I have my suspicions as to why.
Well, this goes back to something else you mentioned. It seems a lot of this is based on the witness accounts, right? Not of what happened or allegedly happened in that studio. And you mentioned something earlier I want to explore. You're saying these alleged victims told local law enforcement what happened or allegedly happened, but they didn't speak with the FBI. So two questions about that. One, based as far as you know, is what's listed in the government's claims, is that accurate from the reports that were filed by local PD? And two, why wouldn't they speak to the FBI if that's true?
So the first part of that is I don't know, because the reports that I got from that evening from the Dallas PD are completely redacted, meaning it looks like, it's a sea of black that is on these reports. So the reports from that evening don't give me a lot of detail as to what exactly was said or who said it. That's the first portion. So I can't tell you whether or not it's accurate to the complaint. I can tell you the complaint is rather sloppy in terms of what each person said and where things took place. But putting that aside, that's the first part of that. Why wouldn't they talk to the FBI? It could be sometimes something happens and you feel some sort of way that night, and then time goes by and you start to consider my options and how this is going to go, and that I have to be at kind of the FBI's beck and call, subpoenaed to come to Dallas, Texas, subpoenaed on phone calls and different memorandums and different things that going forward. And, it's quite unusual. The hip hop rap world looks at snitching in different ways. And sometimes people say everything is snitching. There's one guy who's on, he's got a podcast. He thinks everything's snitching. If you plea, it's snitching. If you do this, it's snitching.
That's whack. You talking about whack. You got to be talking about whack, right?
Kind of the FBI's beck and call, subpoenaed to come to Dallas, Texas, subpoenaed on phone calls and different memorandums and different things that going forward. And, it's quite unusual. The hip hop rap world looks at snitching in different ways. And sometimes people say everything is snitching. There's one guy who's on, he's got a podcast. He thinks everything's snitching. If you plea, it's snitching. If you do this, it's snitching. So people are really divided as to these guys are real gangsters, but now on the other hand, they're snitching. And then other people are saying, well, the guy's a businessman now. He's not a street guy. And, that's just the way, you should do business a certain way. There's a lot going on here, a lot of dynamics. So I don't know why they haven't spoken to the FBI in 3 or 4 months. The FBI seems to think it was just a scheduling conflict, which I find extremely hard to believe.
They said that at the bond hearing?
Yeah, she said it, yeah. We just couldn't get together in the past 4 months. There's 5 different witnesses. None of them could even get on Zoom. They couldn't give you anything. Nope. They just were too busy. So I just don't buy that. Now, whether or not going forward they're going to be cooperating and the level of cooperation, I don't know. You know what I mean? And I don't depend on that on any case. I assume cases are going forward based on the evidence that was presented at a bond hearing. And I assume that they're telling me the truth, that, they're going to be cooperating. The FBI says they're going to be cooperating. So I can't take it as that they're lying to me. I prepare my case as if they're telling me the truth.
Right.
Whether or not at trial that ends up being the case, it's usually not.
So I want to now go into a specific piece of alleged evidence about your client that was as part of this filing, and it was purportedly used, to as support for the arrest. And so it says, the complaint claims that your client was wearing an ankle monitor because he was serving a sentence, like you mentioned, the prior case, these federal charges, I believe drug and weapons charges, and he was sentenced to home detention. He had to wear an electronic monitoring device. And they say that authorities were able to allegedly use the location data from that device to seemingly track his apparent movements near the crime scene. And I believe they say that the ankle monitor was used to track him and William Sr. to a Staples, and the allegation was there that they went to a Staples early in the day to print off that agreement, to print off the contractual release paperwork that they say they were forcing RD to later sign. And the feds also claim that the surveillance video and the GPS data, they put them there. So talk to me about the ankle monitor.
Sure. First, let me just address the Staples thing. Like, I don't even care if they're at Staples. Like, they're going to a recording studio, and normally my clients usually print off the lyrics for different individuals. If you have 5 individuals that are going to be on one record and they each have a section or a part.
Yeah, I love Bradford Cohen, but this was like almost the equivalent. Well, that was really horrible for Mark Agnifilo, and it was like, yo, baby oil. Yo, he probably got that shit at Costco. What you mean, mad baby oil? Like, yo, that shit normal. Bruv, like, I'd rather you not give an explanation for the baby oil. Just like this, be like, yeah, yo, Pooh, Shiesty and his niggas go to Staples to print out lyrics. Like, yo, come on. Obviously, he's a defense attorney. He's saying some stuff, but like, come on, bruv.
Normally, my clients usually print off the lyrics for different individuals. If you have 5 individuals that are going to be on one record and they each have a section or a part, they'll usually print those things off. So I really didn't care about the Staples thing. The electronic monitor, again, people will tell me, oh, we have this data. This is the data that we have. And then when I get it, it's typically not what they represent. Now, I don't know. It could be exactly what they represent. And if it is, then we'll deal with it. Then, then we don't say a certain defense of, oh, well, he wasn't there or he was in the area or whatever it is. We have to create the defense and create a way to make sure that they're held to their burden, the government. So it doesn't matter what they say, it's matter what they have. So
But
yes,
he was
if they
wearing
have
it.
that,
Was he wearing a monitor? Do you know?
yes, he was wearing an electronic monitor. And if they have the data and the data is accurate, then we deal with that. But I don't know if that's the case. I had a murder case that I got dismissed that was in Tampa where they're like, hey, this phone, it puts him right at the scene at the time of the shooting. Then I get the data. It puts him within 350 yards of the scene somewhere near the time of the shooting. So it's like, it's always some little twist on what they say and what I get. There's usually a difference. Now, I don't know if that's the case here. It might not be. So I have to see what the actual evidence is first, and then I'll deal with it.
Let's talk about the
Hey, I like how, he's saying a lot but saying nothing.
vehicle ID and cell phone record evidence. So the affidavit claims that Wright's father owns a 2020 Dodge Charger Hellcat with Tennessee plates, and authorities allegedly used license plate readers to track the Charger following another car, Dodge Ram, at 2:18 p.m. on January 10th. Then they claim that the Dodge Ram looks like the one on surveillance video near the studio, near the crime scene later that afternoon. They apparently used the license plate readers to also link the Charger traveling close to a white Buick Enclave, and through rental records, they determined that that Enclave was rented by Williams Sr. And the cell phone records for Williams Jr., again, your client and others, and the telematics location data for the cars, as well as the GPS data from the electronic monitoring device, authorities claim they're tracking them the journey from Memphis, Tennessee to Dallas, Texas, that the electronic monitoring device allegedly aligns with the records, tracking to Winrose Tower, where Williams Jr. was allegedly residing, traveling to the alleged crime scene, when they allegedly left the scene, going to the Comfort Inn at one point, And by the way, with the Comfort Inn, authorities allegedly have rental records from the rooms and surveillance footage allegedly showing them at this location, and that some of the defendants were wearing clothes that were very similar to what the suspects were allegedly wearing at the studio based on the surveillance footage. So I know that's a lot, Bradford, but basically it's digital evidence, right? It's surveillance, it's rental records, it's cars, GPS. Talk to me about that.
So long story short is, if all of that is true, the most that does is put everyone at the scene, right? It still doesn't say if a robbery occurred, doesn't say that a kidnapping occurred. In fact, the jurisdictional element of this is really troublesome because they don't put in the dates of that, the travel from Tennessee to Dallas. Now, kidnapping is very specific. You have to travel
federal
kidnapping. You have to travel in order to complete the crime that you are accused of. These guys were there for a week or a week and a half recording songs and doing all this stuff. So like the jurisdictional element, they don't even address, where Pooh actually lives in Dallas. The alleged victim came to Dallas willingly, which again, that's an element of kidnapping that's not there. All these different things about jurisdiction. At the bond hearing, they were like, well, if they used the cell phone to record this signing, then that's the commerce clause and it affects interstate commerce. The problem with that is there's specific case law that the cell phone would have to be used in furtherance of the kidnapping. So filming someone and then sending it to Bob Smith and saying, hey, if you don't pay me a ransom, here's the video of your guy. That's in furtherance of the crime. Filming someone allegedly signing a contract is not in furtherance of the crime. So they're going to have a lot of problem with jurisdiction. I know they're scrambling to try and make sure to shore that up with jurisdiction. But the basic is they found no gun, so they can't say whether or not the gun was made in Texas. If the gun was made in Texas, it doesn't affect interstate commerce. They found no ammo. If the ammo was made in Texas, doesn't affect interstate commerce. The only phone that was used in any of this was this alleged recording, which no one has, and they can't say that affected the actual kidnapping. So they have a problem there. They have a problem going back and forth throughout this case with jurisdiction in terms of proving that the phone or something in interstate commerce was used in furtherance of the kidnapping. That's going to be a real problem for them, which they don't address. And all these complaints, all these indictments, they're very heavy on what they have because they want to make like, oh, we got him here, we got him here, we got him here. What they don't have is they have no guns, they have no ammo, they have no contract, they have no video inside the studio. They have no other witnesses besides only the alleged victims. There were 2 other witnesses in there. Those witnesses say, we didn't hear anything, we didn't see anything, no one told us anything. One of them's the owner of the studio. One of them, I think, is an intern from the studio. And this isn't a massive, big studio. There's a couple different recording studios, but these were the only guys recording there. So it wasn't like they were checking on other studios to see how everyone's doing. There's only one group there. So it's unusual that they didn't hear anything or see anything. The whole thing is weird. And like the fact that MM says to, walks towards the door with everyone and says, hey, are you guys really taking my watches? That doesn't sound like me, that someone that was almost going to get shot in the face then says, hey, by the way, are you really taking my watches? That sounds crazy to me.
So I would counter that as a counter argument.
Yes, counter it.
So the purported injuries on MM, couple that with the idea of what we mentioned. If all of that digital data is true, it might place them at the location. But this is the part that we haven't talked about. Last part, I want to get your point on. It's the social media accounts. So authorities, what they did was they compared the descriptions of, let's say, Williams Jr. from the accounts of the alleged victims to an Instagram account at Pooh Shiesty. So allegedly, there you go, showing a match. This is who we described, this is what it is. But then they end up doing that for others. So they say Williams Sr., Wright, Waters, and how there are these photos of them together online, how they match allegedly state IDs with the accounts too. And for the suspects, Rogers and Glover, they allegedly matched the surveillance footage with social media posts of them allegedly possessing the things that were reportedly stolen, like a Rolex watch and a pendant. They're very, very specific items. So the argument would be very unlikely that they would have the exact same thing And so they're basically, the argument is they're flaunting it after this alleged kidnapping robbery. And also the authorities looked at surveillance footage, saw what the suspects were wearing, and matched it to the descriptions of the clothes the suspects were wearing on their social media accounts. So it's the social media activity that authorities are using to tie in the identities of the suspects and what they allegedly had in their possession after the kidnapping and robbery.
Sure. So one thing is, and I thought this was very interesting, it looked like Gucci came out with the exact stuff that was allegedly stolen, saying like, here's my chain and here's something else. I think that he actually showed like some jewelry that was allegedly stolen and that it was still in his possession. That's the first unusual part. The second unusual part of that is the watches and things of that nature. All the government could say is it looked the same as the one that was taken. This watch looks the same as the one that was taken.
He's putting up a pretty good defense, and that's why I think that I like what Pooh Shiesty, people are saying that generally attorneys should not do these interviews. I think Bradford Cohen did an amazing job. He admitted nothing. He won't even admit that Pooh Shiesty was at the studio. He's not admitting it, or he's not saying that's not true. But he's going into this whole thing by saying, yo, they got to prove it to us. We don't got nothing to prove. We just say their story's lies. That's all we're going to say. And whatever they're going to say in terms of their story, we just got to pick apart. Okay. We get to find out that the feds are now trying to, if you don't know, everybody pretty much got a bail except two people, Lontrell Williams, which is Pooh Shiesty, and this other guy. And I think he got other charges. Everybody else is being offered a bail, at least by the magistrate, at least the Tennessee magistrate. Now, what happened is that the government, they're pretty much appealing everybody's bail. And by the way, some of the bail packages being offered are $250,000 for the father, $100,000 for Big 30, and you can imagine probably so and so for the rest. So essentially, what happened is that the government doesn't want these guys out because it's going to look like this case is a little bit weak, and they're appealing this bail offering by the judge. And the way it works is that the magistrate is the first judge you see. It's like an intake judge. The magistrate was the judge in the state, even though it's still a federal judge, but it was the judge in the district, which is Tennessee, or whatever district Tennessee falls in there. The Tennessee judge gave a bond, so they appeal it, and usually a normal appeal would go to the circuit courts, but this one, since you appealed it with the magistrate judge, it goes to the district judge, and the district judge is the judge that's actually following this entire case, right? So it's going to be their case from start to end. And they're asking the trial judge, which is the district judge, hey, judge, could we repeal this bond? We don't think these guys should get out of jail. Now, they had to submit what's called briefs. And what that is, you give your argument to the judge why you think the decision made prior or some type of court decision was incorrect. And this is what they wrote in their brief, in their memorandum. They said, they're talking about Big 30. They said the magistrate judge characterized the defendant, Big 30, criminal history as minimal and pretty close to flawless. But the government respectfully submits that this characterization both understates the significance of what of what his record is, and fails to fully account for what this conduct reveals about his propensity for violence. In 2018, the defendant was charged with reckless endangerment with the firearm and unlawful possession of a weapon. In these circumstances, the circumstance of that offense involved a near miss in every sense. The defendant fired a Draco-style rifle in a residential area at 2:43 in the afternoon, not at the stroke of midnight, and the rounds struck near an apartment where a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old were sitting in their bedroom. Rather than a felony conviction, the defendant received the extraordinary benefit of the judicial diversion program, which he successfully did complete, leaving him with no criminal record at all. He was given as the government described it, a second lease on life. But rather than using that opportunity to distance himself from firearms and violence, Big 30 chose to participate in the armed kidnapping of 3 more people, personally retrieving the weapon used to hold the man at gunpoint, the Draco that he passed to Shiesty. And he barricaded the door while armed. The pretrial services report also reflects that the defendant is identified in law enforcement database as a member of the Grape Street Crips. While the defendant father denied knowledge of gang involvement, the database entry, combined with the defendant's association with the co-defendants, many of whom share the 375 gang identifier, and a purple Glock further in the grape theme, it suggests ongoing ties to the organized criminal networks. The defendant's financial profile further underscores why he's a flight risk, and that's what he poses. The testimony from the defendant's label rep, okay? So the label rep did testify for Big 30. It actually established that he's on the verge of executing a 7-figure recording deal with Connect Music Group, a deal whose final revisions were just received a few days before his arrest. That deal, however, has not been executed, and upon execution is going to require the defendant to deliver an album within 145 days. The deal cuts both ways. If the defendant believes the prosecution will prevent him from fulfilling the contract and obligation, and if the deal collapses, he's going to lose the single financial incentive that the defendant's claims tethers him to this jurisdiction. If, on the other hand, the deal remains available, the defendant has access to 7 figures in resources with which to flee. Resources could dwarf a $10,000 bond payment, which, remember, you got $100,000 in bond, but you could pay in bail, but you could pay a bond, which is usually 10%. So either way, the unexecuted deal does not favor release. It actually illustrates the inadequacy of financial conditions alone to mitigate this defendant's flight risk. Moreover, the defendant's conduct at arrest, being found in the vehicle containing 4 firearms and a smashed phone, reveals his day-to-day reality involves the routine possession of an assault-style weapon and a readiness to obstruct law enforcement. Oh, okay, so it tells you a little bit more about his arrest. They found him in a car. He had 4 guns and a smashed phone. Now, keep in mind, I think in Tennessee, it doesn't mean those guns are illegal. So that's why they're not saying he had illegal guns. So this is not the profile of an individual that could be trusted to comply with the conditions of release and who will take steps to evade the reach of the court if given the opportunity. The factor weighs in favor of detention. Danger to any person of community. They're saying the defendant, Big 30, poses substantial danger to the community and flight risk. His operational role in the kidnapping was among the most significant of any co-defendant. He brought the guns, he filmed the crime, he barricaded the exit, and he confronted armed security. His arrest 3 months later with a Draco and another handgun, the same styles of weapon used in the kidnapping, demonstrates he's made no effort to distance himself from firearms or violence in the intervening period. This factor weighs in heavily in terms of detention. They're also saying the magistrate judge erred in concluding that home detention was adequate. They're saying, granted bond, the magistrate judge acknowledged that the defendant was pretty heavily involved in this incredibly serious, dangerous incident, and that it was a very close case, but concluded that its minimal criminal history, strong family ties, and promising career tipped the balance towards release with conditions. The government respectfully contends that the magistrate judge gave insufficient weight to several critical factors. First of all, the defendant's role in the charged offense was far more active and dangerous than the court analysis reflected. The magistrate characterized the evidence of the defendant possessing a firearm during the offense not fully defined and not entirely clear, knowing that there's not real clear evidence that he had a firearm, although he brought someone a firearm, which is Shiesty. The characterization does not hold up against record. The uncontroverted testimony established that when security officers, CW and TD, managed to breach the door partially, they observed the defendant and at least 2 others standing behind it, and that the defendant was pointing a gun at the security guards. Oh, we didn't know that. So they're saying Big 30 and then was pointing a gun at the security guards, which caused them to recognize they were outgunned and outnumbered and had to retreat. The agent further testified that all the victims reported that every defendant in the control room had a firearm, and that it was specifically reported that the defendant did not. That the defendant did have one, so Big 30 did have one. Criminal complaint states that the remaining subjects produced handguns or AR/AK style pistols as the group exited the recording room. Okay. All right. Okay, so they're saying this guy's about to sign a $1 million deal. If he signs his deal, it's going to give him more resources to leave. Also, if he feels that he's not going to be able to fulfill the deal, that's even more reason to leave. Maybe because he gets locked up, maybe because of other stuff. So they're saying we should just keep him in jail. Now, I based on how it works when you appeal something, usually a judge doesn't go instantly to disagree with the next judge. Usually they give the judge the benefit of the doubt of making the right decision in the first place. So unless you point out something really procedurally wrong, they don't flip when you appeal. Okay.
They can't say whether or not it is that watch. And in fact, on one of them, where they said, I think it was like a Rolex with a Jubilee band. I forgot the type of Rolex that it was, but they can't say that it is that Rolex. And in fact, that individual who had that watch has a receipt for purchasing that same Rolex. And in the next picture on his Instagram, it shows the box, the papers, and the receipt for the purchase of that Rolex. So there's a lot of things there that I think might be unusual. It doesn't have every single thing that was taken. I think there was a Rolex and some jewelry that was displayed in some Instagram pictures. And again, those aren't Instagram pictures.
All right, so it could be anybody's thing, okay? All right. That's your update, chat. Pooh Shiesty is in. I have the paperwork for Pooh Shiesty in his detention. It's not much to see there. His lawyers, which is my guy Bradford Cohen, they're not going to put up a fight on detention. The guy's on an ankle monitor. He's accused of doing a first-degree crime. There's not much you could be like, oh, no, let him back out. It's going to be like, come on, right? So they didn't fight detention a lot. They're just fighting the veracity of the case, or, does the case hold any water currently? Which, by the way, that's going to have to get figured out through a indictment, through a grand jury. So we will figure out at some point. All right, chat. Don't know if you guys seen this.